Hello and welcome to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic, and today we will be talking about Season 3, Episodes 4 and 5, Hotekk's Challenge. So grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in. With the episode summary, Tom wins a battle as Tanguth Toborn against a Marillion in the Hotekk Drome, which qualifies him for a Codemaster match. Hotekk challenges Tom and gives him 24 hours to prepare. So Tom ports around Param to get scans to help his strategy. But he won't share what that strategy is, not even to his friends. So Peyton, Kaz, and Sarah follow Tom around Param to gain insight on Tom's strategy, but they don't learn anything. So Tom goes into his Codemaster match and chooses an odd selection of creatures, while Hotekk has a team of ancient and prehistoric creatures. They battle. Hotekk wins some, Tom wins some, and Hotekk uses a seemingly useless music, while Tom's strategy is revealed to be picking creatures with unusually altered stats to create an element of surprise. They make it to the final battle with Tom as Ois, and Hotekk has all 6 of his creatures. This is because of Hotekk's last creature's special ability, but the returning creatures only have 5 energy. So Tom uses flash kicks to reorder his location deck, does a terraform attack to reveal a new location card, and that location deals 5 damage to all creatures. Therefore, Tom defeats all of the creatures that only have 5 energy, making Tom win the match. As a reward for winning the Codemaster match, Hotekk gives Tom a scan of Dranikus Threshold, a seemingly common card, so they port there to investigate. Tom, Kaz, Peyton, and Sarah discover if you turn the dials to the right music notes, Dranikus Threshold will become a portal to the past, and that seemingly useless music that Codemaster Hotekk used was a clue to how Dranikus Threshold worked. In the past, they meet Vorks, a water creature, who demands an offering, and a kind creature saves them and takes them to meet Kiru, the leader of ancient Kiru City, who looks an awful lot like Kaor. Analysis. So these episodes are divided into 3 sections, I would say: before, during, and after the Codemaster match, which of course the Codemaster match being the pivotal moment here, and functionally the Codemaster match works differently from the last one in the story. We get 2 Codemaster matches, so I think it's only fair to compare them. Right, the last Codemaster match with Krellin was more of the completion of an arc. It was Tom's big moment to show that he was no longer a newbie, that he is a good strategist who doesn't rely on his cards. And so that climactic battle with Krellin closed out a storyline, whereas comparing to this episode with Hotekk, it's different. Comparing it to this episode, the Hotekk Codemaster battle doesn't conclude an arc, it is the beginning of one. They are using the Codemaster match against Hotekk to introduce a story instead of resolve one. Here, seemingly, the innocuous Dranikus Threshold opens up a new world for these creatures to explore, and it introduces us to ancient Param, which of course we will dive into. But because these matches are serving different narrative roles, they have a different approach to these matches entirely. This episode, it's not Tom's first rodeo, so he's not really learning anything new for himself, so they flip the perspective to the perspective of Tom's friends. We're not viewing this Codemaster match through Tom's lens, we're viewing it through Kaz, Peyton, and Sarah. And they have something they're trying to figure out, and that's what is Tom's strategy. They create this mystery and this secretive nature around Tom's strategy as a chance for our commentators to lay exposition, and we are following the commentator's experience basically the whole time. Kaz even explains how Tom won the match. We don't get to be with Tom's mind as he's figuring it out. We get the explanation from Kaz. And sure, Tom joins up with the group when they port to the threshold, but even still, this episode uses Kaz, Peyton, and Sarah as insight into Tom's world, opposed to the episode where Tom has the emotional arc, where it's him against Krellin, right? That is very Tom focused. Another difference we see between these episodes is the amount of match we get to see. In the Krellin match, we get to see a lot of the mechanisms of gameplay, and also we just spend more airtime on the matches themselves. Whereas here with Hotekk, we really only focus on 2 or 3 of the battles, and there's just so much more to these episodes than the Codemaster match. Like, we get to see Tom's seventh win that sets him up for the Codemaster match, and then we get to see the whole thing after. We get to see the scan questing, we get to see discovering the portal, we get to see exploring the past, and the Codemaster match itself. So the match holds less importance because it's focusing on its function as a jumping off point rather than the climactic moment itself, right? It just it's not given the same room to breathe and be its own story because it's being used to propel these characters into the past and into a new world. So we've compared how these matches function narratively, but I think it's also fair to compare and contrast the Codemasters themselves because not to call them foils, but they are very different from each other. Krellin is characterized to be a mentor, a friend. He is kind and patient and caring. He offers tips and tricks throughout the gameplay. Plus, he got the one-off Betadrome match to give Tom lessons before their real match ever really takes shape. Tom and Krellin have history. They have rapport. Versus Hotekk, different story. We get a glimpse of the Hotekk costume with the prank against Peyton in When a Codemaster Calls, but this is our first time actually meeting Hotekk, and Hotekk sits in stark contrast to Krellin. He's competitive, he's condescending, he's aggressive, he's rude, he's snippy. They establish this a lot through Hotekk's dialogue. He says, like, you get the privilege of competing against me, which insinuates his presence as an honor. He says, come prepared for defeat, which is smack talk. He calls himself losing uncharacteristic, right? Not good sportsmanship. He teases Tom, did you choose your team with your eyes closed? And then we also get this characterization through his actions. He gives Tom 24 hours to prepare for the match, whereas Krellin gave Tom 72 hours to prepare. 1 day versus 3. That's a big difference. And Hotekk also, he interrupts Tom, he calls him the wrong name, and like, Kaz calls him harsh. And so through his actions, his words, and other people's descriptors, they really establish Hotekk as a very different codemaster than Krellin. Because Krellin was a mentor and Hotekk is an antagonist. So now let's go back to the beginning of the episode. At the beginning of this episode, we see Tom battling Nunkworm, and they use this battle to bring up some of the concepts that return in the Codemaster battle. They emphasize Nunkworm's altered stat. With the Coral Ambered Shard, of course, he has Earth, Fire, and Water. This is similar to why Tom scanned Ois, who learned fire attacks. These altered stats, these additional elements, give that creature an advantage. And so another concept that's introduced in this battle is the shard returns after being destroyed due to the locational effects, right? Which conceptually foreshadows the twist in Hotekk's match, where all the creatures return with 5 energy because of the special ability of the final creature. And so this concept of things returning even though they've been lost or destroyed comes back. Two things foreshadowed conceptually in this beginning match. And so this 7th win for Tom shows you versions of the concepts that are applied in the Codemaster match, just at a smaller scale. This is an appetizer. They're, acquainting you to the world and the rules of the world so that when those rules come back, it doesn't take you off guard, right? You understand that it can happen, and even though it's still like a twist, oh, these characters came back in the final battle, it still feels like it's within the world that that is capable to happen. Next, we also get some foreshadowing when Tom ports all around Param to build his deck for the Codemaster match. And I do want to note this is a bold strategy for Tom, right? To scan the majority of your team for the Codemaster match in the 24 hours leading up to it, that just seems crazy. But not only that, last time he scanned a Mujik right before the match and he used it and it had unanticipated consequences. And so you think Tom would have like learned his lesson and like planned ahead. And he did plan ahead, but like to rely on your cards that are tried and true, not try something new, that's a mistake he used last time. Versus, I mean, he did end up using that music to like win the battle or whatever. But this time he's like scanning a lot of things. But Tom wants to lean into the element of surprise. So building his deck took not only planning, but a lot of luck to secure all of these scans in the time allotted. And not only is it going to be surprising Codemaster Hotekk because like these are all brand new scans, it does take skill and luck and I don't know, a little bit of plot armor to use all of these brand new scans in the way that Tom wants. Next, we get into the Codemaster match itself, and we do get a callback to the very first episode when Tom battled in Glacier Plains. It's a physical gag for a joke, and you laugh, it's funny, you get it. And then finally, there's the time travel piece of it all. And so this is not the first time we've seen time travel at Chaotic, but this one works differently, and of course, we'll learn more about it soon. But the other time we saw time travel was with Rodden in season 2, and I think it's no coincidence that both Krellin and Hotekk use creatures from the past as part of their strategy. And so that's an interesting similarity between the two, but this time travel piece connected to Dranica's threshold really opens that up. And you come to understand why and how they got the scans that they did. So now let's move on to lore. Of course, the big piece of lore in this episode is Dranica's threshold is a gateway to the past. What? And so in order to unlock the gate, you have to turn all the dials to the enigmatic etude music notes, and seemingly it transports you to a random location in a specific time period in the past. Whereas with Rodden at Kierbach Mound, that transported you to a random time but a specific location. So that's like flipped. And I think that's interesting. But here in the past, we learn about Vorks, the water creature, who needs offerings to please him. And we learn about the ancient overworld tribe, who have created a tunnel system to navigate Param when their enemies are unhappy. So not only is there a tribe, but they already have enemies. And we see a creature that's described as Dractyl's big brother, and we get this big cliffhanger that they're in ancient Kiru City, and Kaor looks a lot like Kiru, just Kaor is red and Kiru is blue, and so that's like our cliffhanger. Now there are some things that I want to point out. They call Kiru the oligarch, which describes a governmental type where, multiple people are in charge. And so Kiru must have some like co-leaders of Kiru City, but they also contradict that and call him the supreme ruler of our tribe. So, what's the truth? I'm going to port to ancient Param and I'm going to ask some hard-hitting questions. What is the governmental structure here? Right, because describing Kiru as both an oligarch and the supreme leader, contradictory. And so, like, don't call it an oligarchy if it is just a monarchy. What is going on here? And so, insight into the past governmental structure would also give us insight into the present governmental structure of the overworld. And Maxor is in charge of the overworld, and so they're having a singular leader, and they have a singular leader. Right, it makes sense. But two, the other thing I want to point out is this ancient curious city, the landscape. I would call it green, I would call it hilly. And, it's a city on a hill, maybe a mountain, but there's an incline. Whereas modern day Curious City, flat, in the middle of a flat, dusty plain that, they have a city wall. Around this city wall, flat dust. And eventually you get to the Riverlands, or eventually you get to the jungle. But Curious City is on a flat piece of dusty land. And so all I'm saying is that something must have happened in the last 1,000 years to transform this landscape. And if I had to postulate, in the Rasmus Returns episode, there was ruins of a city underground, Curious City, and that's where like Rasmus and Interest were fighting. And so that's maybe something like, did this version of Curious City get buried and now we have a new version of Curious City on top of it? Or like what flattened this hill? or what filled in the gaps. Something must have happened. And I think that's interesting. A clue, some would say. And of course, we will learn more about time travel and the past and what's going on here in the oncoming episodes. So get excited for that. But some more things we learn in this episode is the coral amber shard was forged in the Marillion Shard Crafter's Workshop, right? Which gives us insight on how shards become usable gear and the location in which it happens. We also get a mention of Tanith Toborn, which they suggest that he's dead, which confirms Tanith Toborn's fate, because after last season, his fate was still unknown when he was swallowed by the wave that was hit with the Song of Stasis. And so, like, this conversation about confirming that, tragedy has happened to Tanith Toborn feels like an important, not only resolution of what has happened, but also maybe a building block of what's to come. But they give him a respectful moment. And then we also get some, chaotic lore about what's going on at the inner workings of chaotic. And one of those is that Hotekk gives Tom 24 hours to prepare for his match, whereas Krellin gave Tom 72. We learned that this time frame must be determined by the Codemaster themselves for their own drome. Like each drome sounds like it has different rules. We also see an outdoor amphitheater at Chaotic where, Tom, Kaz, and Sarah watch the match on these outdoor screens. And it seems like a great place for viewing matches, great place to do some Shakespeare. And of course, we also get some scanner lore in this episode. We get instant replay on past video calls, which is this a privacy issue? I'm finding a lot of the footage at Chaotic is public record and that you can replay a lot of them in slow-mo, which I think is crazy. And like, is that a privacy issue? Maybe. Because if you can just go back and like replay any of your calls in slow motion, I don't know, seems dangerous. Now, also, another thing I want to point out is that the calls when you're in the drome, like Tom is having a conversation with his friends and he's like explaining his whole strategy. And so there must be some kind of like sound barrier, mute feature of like what's going on in the drome because there's no way that Tom just like told Hotekk his whole strategy when he was trying to tell his friends. And like sure, maybe he was trying to be secretive, but like there just must be something there. Which speaking of Tom's strategy, he really leans into this stat alteration strategy, and that gives us insight onto these creatures and how their stats were altered. So we get Господин and Momark doing experiments in the storm grounds with lightning and with machinery, and that gives Momark a lot of speed, 120, which is like a lot more than Господин. And also we know that like Bodil knows about this enough to tell Tom. We get Vidav has been looking after Hotan at Castle Bodran, which Castle Bodran this time looks more like the card art. And it's also interesting because this brings up questions about Vidav and Hotan. Did they finish rebuilding Hotan's village, or did they not finish and need to go to a secondary location? Vidav is using music on Hotan, so this version of Hotan has full energy and knows Armageddon. And so, like, what was once rare, only one person had this full energy, Armageddon, knowledge ridden Hotan. It is a more common scan, but he's still in recovery. We learned that Dardamus taught Ois how to do fire attacks because they became friends during the Marillion invasion, which means at some point during the pushback, they became friends, or they met and, developed a relationship. This also means that elemental types is a teachable skill and not based on innate ability, which I think is interesting in this universe, and it makes you wonder why doesn't everybody just train all of the elements? Why can't everybody be heptad and just like have all four elements mastered? You can pick up one or two if you want. We also learn Ikatosh being a giant ice tree gets boosted during the Forest of Life at Ichlis, and that's four of the six cards in Tom's deck, the other two being Protector of Paramaxor, who is boosted based on wearing the armor, and also Renjas, who says that he's super competitive at the overworld training grounds. So I don't know what that means, like if he's boosted or he's just like has a bunch of adrenaline. And I think those two are more interesting because, right, we know that you can change a creature's stats if they're boosted on music or if they have a locational effect. But like scanning Maxor while he's in the Protector of Param armor, affecting his base stat, like you would think that you would have to equip him with that armor to get those benefits, like have the armor as his battle gear and to get those benefits. But if he's just wearing the armor when you scan him, he just has that benefit and wears that outfit. It's interesting to think about. On to fun facts and other notes. The Nunkworn in Tom's first battle is based on the Toys R Us promo version of that card. Hotekk has a silver scanner, which, interesting, is it supposed to be tribeless? Is it just supposed to match, the Codemaster aesthetic? Interesting to think about. And some of Hotekk's creatures look like, some modern creatures, and so we had to postulate some lineage. One of them is Hearing's ancestor, one of them is Zerg's ancestor, I would guess, and maybe Zar. Those are the clear ones to me, I think. There's one for this floaty guy, but I couldn't find the creature I was thinking about, and so I couldn't tell you that. And then there's like Ixik, who's, giving bones from Glacier Plains, and there's this slug guy who I don't know if we really have any comparisons to the slug guy. So let me know if you have any guesses. Other notes I have include ticking time bomb device used in the last battle of the match with the energy going down, energy 25, energy 15, energy 10. Right? You get that countdown which increases the hype and excitability and like the stakes of it all. Then we also get the music Enigmatic Etude for Dranica's Threshold, which I couldn't find a card for this, so that's fun. But yes, Threshold is like a door or a gateway, so that was a hint there the whole time. Like the doors of the deep mine is a door, right? What's behind the door? We don't know. What's the threshold? A threshold too, right? So you can kind of piece together like, yeah, they've been hiding these clues in front of us this whole time, but also the enigmatic etude, right? Like an enigma, enigmatic. It's like a mysterious puzzle. And so if they've scattered clues around, it's on us to do some sleuthing. And my final note here is that Tom's strategy was to use a bunch of average cards with their stats boosted or changed, which I think is set up with the two Victars in the Tale of Two Toms episode, right? You have Cool Tom who scanned Victar with the boosted music. And so the fact that this is even possible, that this strategy lives within the world, has been set up in previous episodes. And, it makes sense. But I think making that connection maybe helps to understand where Tom got this idea from. And maybe it's because he was jealous of Cool Tom. Now, my final thoughts on this episode are I love a Codemaster battle, and I like how they differentiate Hotekk through his personality and how he uses different tricks than Krellin. I like Tom's strategy. I always thought it was really clever, even though it took me a few times to understand. The moment with the flash kicks is like seared into my mind. Except for a while I did misremember it. I thought Maxwell was doing the flash kicks, but because like Ois, what a random choice. But like that's part of Tom's strategy is the element of surprise. And, they take Maxwell out right away. But I like this strategic moment and how, like, even after it's explained, right, it's complicated, but I like how it makes sense, right? There's a through line there of Tom understands they only have 5 creatures because he defeated a creature with an attack that only does 5 damage. And so he's like, okay, they all have 5 damage. How can I deal 5 damage to all of them at once? Change the location. How can I change the location? A terraform attack. How can I ensure the location that I want that deals 5 damage? Well, that's with the flash kicks. And, that's the benefit of having the commentators. They can help explain all of this to you. But I always thought that was a really cool way to end this match. And I do like how they build up to the match, and I like how the prize ties into the oncoming story. I like how this sets us up for a new adventure. If I had to wish anything, like if there was anything on my wish list, I wish we had gotten to see more of Hotekk's creatures in action. Like I wish we got to see more of the match and had a big match format. Like they don't really use the big match format because right, they're doing something else. They're trying something new. But I think something like a Codemaster match deserves the gravitas of like this is a dedicated event, and that's how I feel. And I think they do that, but like they could have saved the time travel stuff for the next episode. We could have ended it with Tom being confused about Dranica's threshold, and that would have worked for me. Like that could have been a good cliffhanger to set us up, and then we like started with the time travel stuff. But things could go a million different ways, and we have to talk about what we do have and not what we could have had. And this episode, it works for me. We have a setup, we have the match, and then we have after the match. And I don't know. I think the weakest part of it is after they time travel, or like, okay, maybe even if they figured out Dranica's threshold and they transported, and then boom, that's the cliffhanger. I just like, I think we do a little bit of wandering, and that's fine. I love to get to see the world. But those are my thoughts. So all in all, good first part. I like the match, and the exploration after is good. I think it should be a separate episode, and that's what I think. Which one do you like better? Do you like the Hotekk Codemaster match better, or do you like the Krellin one? I think just the flash kick moment has been seared into my mind so much. I'm inclined to choose. I like the Hotekk match better, even though I like Codemaster Krellin better as a character. So let me know what you think, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!